we started each one with an awful joke. Like, it's just like
Oh,
like
what
a
did
movie
one pig
themed
say to the
joke.
other? Oh,
It doesn't have to be movie themed. I don't know.
what did one pig say to the other sexy pig?
Oh God.
No, he said, "Hi, I'm Andy Laboon. Would you like to go out sometime?"
Did you just call Andy a sexy pig?
You know I did.
No, I got another one. I got another one. What did one sexy pig say to the other sexy pig?
What?
Welcome to our podcast. I'm Andy Laboon.
Mama did it for my mama. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mama did it for my mama. Yeah. Okay. So that was. Hey.
Hello, what's going on? This is Tell Me When to Stop. I'm Jack Cherry.
Generic YouTube greeting. I'm Sam Marzella.
I'm Andy Laboon.
This started off so well.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Alright,
this is our little movie discussion,
Chaw.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yep.
I guess it's not right to call it a podcast because it's not going on podcast.
It's a cast. We're in a cast.
What's like the definition of a podcast? Like, what makes a podcast a podcast?
Oh my gosh, that's not what this podcast is about.
No, I'm curious.
Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to How Things Work.
So we were watching Goodfellas.
Yes.
And we finished Goodfellas, and we couldn't stop talking about Goodfellas. And we were like, whoa, what if we recorded this? Voila.
I feel like it's always a scary way to start a story with, okay, so I watched Goodfellas and I got an idea.
It's Goodfellas is the Catcher in the Rye of the movies. You know, like they always found Catcher in the Rye at the who is it that was assassinated? Was it John Lennon? He died, right?
Yes, John
No,
Lennon
I'm
died.
serious. I'm serious. So they found the Catcher in the Rye in the assassinator's like stuff, and the Catcher in the Rye book has been found at like tons and tons of like
I just put it in my pants.
killers like things, and so that's why it became such
Oh,
a
and
banned book.
and now there's like a wave of people with Goodfellas DVDs like in their coat pocket as they're murdering
I'm
people.
just saying, like, yeah, it's the next vigilante kind of. I shouldn't say vigilante. The person that killed John Lennon is not a vigilante.
Moral of the story is we talked about Goodfellas. We liked our discussion. We have big egos and want to record it and put it out to the world. So this is Tell Me When to Stop.
This is
Mhm.
welcome.
Okay, I think we've wasted enough time.
Okay, so the movies we watched were the Newman Redford duo movies, The Sting and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Let's like real quick, just not to sidebar. We should clarify. Spoiler alert for these. These are films made in the 60s and 70s, and we will probably in our conversation touch on to like major plot points.
This movie, I think, if you know what's going to happen, it might even elevate the whole movie. I don't think it takes away from like just the beauty of watching it and
True.
watching like these actors on the screen. It's amazing.
That is the point. That if you haven't seen either of these two films, sorry, Sam, like get the fuck.
You suck. If you haven't seen these films, they've been out since the freaking 70s. So we watched them last night and have not had our discussion yet.
I have no idea.
We watched until 2 a.m. for you guys?
2:30.
2:30 for you guys. So we hung up, had our thoughts with us, and now we're talking about it.
So Butch Cassidy the Sundance Kid came out in 1969. It's rated PG. This is an hour and 50 minutes.
Do we really need to talk
Directed,
about
quick things, okay? Directed by George Roy Hill, written by William Goldman.
Yeah, Butch
Anyways.
Cassidy the Sundance Kid, no surprise, it's an American classic in cinema. Stars Robert Redford as the Sundance Kid and Paul Newman as the titular character Butch Cassidy as two duos, real-life criminals in American history.
Right.
Were bandits in the Old West. They never really clarified in the film where, that then fled to South America once they were
Bolivia.
To Bolivia, and caught there once they were chased out of the United States. It was directed by who? Oh gosh,
George.
It's
George
the same
Roy
director
Hill?
for both movies, yeah.
Yeah.
George Roy Hill. So in fact, it's a trio of Paul Newman, Robert Redford, and George Roy Hill between the two movies. Oh, I didn't know this took place in the early 1900s. I thought this was an 1800s movie, like Civil War era.
Well, so that's
interesting.
That's one of the things that's so interesting about this movie is that it is a Western movie that defies all of the rules about Western movies. And like one of those rules is that is the time that it takes place, because it goes into the whole idea of George Roy Hill that he was going to make a Western movie that defied the general rules of Western movies. And one of those rules is when it takes place, right? Because the American frontier ended in 1873, I think that was like when the American frontier officially, I don't know. Yeah,
Jack's played more Red Dead, so he would know.
Well, it's post Civil War, post westward expansion. Well, the peak age of westward expansion, which most Westerns by like John Ford from like the 1950s, 40s, and 30s would talk about, like the classic John Wayne film like Stagecoach, and even a film like The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, which even that is similar in the vein of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, in which it though not identical, in which it defies what the original Western in Hollywood was about.
So kind of keeping with that history thing, I feel like we're just doing a history podcast now. This is my first time watching it. You guys had seen this movie before, yes?
Yeah, it's no doubt.
So the first scene of the film is in a sepia, like faded color, yeah? Would you call it sepia?
Right.
I'd call it sepia, you know?
Yeah, sepia.
Yeah. And it's the casual classic Western scene where like somebody ticks the main character off, and then he has to be like all confident and be like, you need to apologize, basically. But then right after it, I think it like completely changes like tone entirely. And I think it's a really cool, like, the whole movie is a huge diversion of expectations. I think that's the first like instance of it, and I think it's a really good way to start the movie.
The failing of expectation, like it sets you up, it's constantly letting you down of like what you think a Western is going to be. And the plot, like you pointed this out, like the plot changes about 3 times. What's so brilliant about it is that it's aware that it's a Western, and like even the characters in it, like they know they're going to get robbed because they're in a Western film, you know? Like there's small thing, and like the duel scene at the very end, there's like this ridiculous amount of shooting that's just like not practical or possibly realistic, but that's like shooting is part of the Western film, so we're going to give you a waterfall of shooting noises right now.
Sorry.
But yeah, some other things they do is, or the director does to like flip our expectations of a Western film, is like the soundtrack is a perfect example of this.
That's my only critique.
You're
of
going
this movie.
into it. Really? Oh my! Why didn't you like the soundtrack?
No, not the whole soundtrack, just the acapella part. I enjoyed it. It just, and I don't know. I didn't enjoy it, but I appreciated it. I don't know. It was the one thing I could
what
find
acapella part are you talking about?
The whole montage when they're in Bolivia and they're robbing all the places, and like the weird acapella music starts. I didn't like that song.
What do you think of the song during the point I want to bring up later, when I want to talk about the characters of this, the bike sequence?
The bike sequence, I also, I don't know, I'm going to be a stickler, but I don't think it's necessary. I appreciated it, but all it did was keep things light. I think it was almost a forceful, like, this isn't a Western scene. And I thought it was funny. I enjoyed it. But in the overall, like, this is the Western movie that's going to defy our expectations. Here's the scene that's going to be completely different from the rest of the movie. We're going to put it right here. What did it do for the characters besides show the relationship?
Do you feel like the soundtrack, and especially like, I guess I'll talk specifically about like the raindrop sequence on the bike. Like, do you think that although it didn't add to character development that much, do you think it added to the film?
I think reverse that. It did character development, but it didn't add anything to the film.
But
Wait, what? Wait,
I
thought you said it the other way.
No. I'm
wait, so
saying that
say that?
the scene of the bike, where not the where it's spinning with the raindrops. I'm talking about the montage where they're having fun, and it's
Yeah.
Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid's wife.
Yeah.
I think that only added character development, and I don't think it was necessary
You don't
in
think
a way.
because it's so early on to get to know Butch Cassidy at least, or even
I don't think that
Right.
that gave us anything we didn't already know or could tell.
We can't get into the head of the director, but I imagine his goal in this was to critique Westerns and to go against the standard of Western films. And that's why I think that bike scene is such a perfect addition to it, because that's what Butch Cassidy is. It's not about the plot, and it's kind of about the characters, but it's not really about the characters. It's more of the critique on American Westerns.
I can see where you're coming from. I just don't agree with you.
I will.
And I think it's just like at that point I was still expecting a Western. And so it probably was just the director doing a really great job and doing the whole expectations thing.
I'm curious of what you said, Andy, of like that the plot isn't important to this.
Yeah.
The
Well,
at least?
no. Well, I think that there are some movies that, like, the point of the movie is to tell a really great story, right? And I think that there are some movies that the point is to explore this beautiful character development or this beautiful relationship between two characters. Now, I think Butch Cassidy was neither of those things. I mean, granted, there was a great plot, and I think that there was like a really great relationship between, I mean, part of it, I will say, like, part of the movie was about the relationship between Redford and Newman, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. But I think the point of the movie, or like why he made the movie and what we should be focused on with it, is its critique on Westerns. Like, it's a commentary.
Well, I'm taking it from this point of view that this is one of the first that I though I entirely agree with you that this is a commentary on Westerns. I don't think that is the soul of what, or maybe not what it's about, but of like what makes this movie what it is, of why it is so beholden and loved. Because the two people we haven't really talked about that much is Redford and Newman as Butch Cassidy and the kid. And this was one of the first buddy movies of film history.
Well, one of the first buddy comedy movies.
Yeah, but still,
and it's such a comedy. I love it.
It's definitely a comedy. Fun fact. So this is just kind of bringing out the research that the screenwriter of this, please, is it William Golden?
William Goldman.
William Goldman. William Goldman wrote this because he was fascinated by the true story of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, strictly because of this idea that these famous bandits ran off and were more famous in South America and Bolivia than they were in the United States, even though the bandit and the American West was such a popular thing among Westerns. So he wanted to make a commentary on that, where the titular character, the heroes that we should like, run away, and we still like the fact that they run away. So I think that plays into what you were saying, Andy, about this being a commentary on Westerns. As well as this was the reason why this film was so hard to get made. For those who know a little bit of history about Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, it took them forever to get this movie actually sold to a company that would produce it, because everybody that they would produce it to said, no, I'm not going to make this, because why the hell are they running away? One producer even said, John Wayne doesn't run from a fight or something like that. That's paraphrasing, don't quote me on that. It took forever to even get Robert Redford in this movie, because Paul Newman was attached to the script forever. And originally the Sundance Kid was going to be played by Warren Beatty. He dropped it because he thought it was too similar to Bonnie.
Really?
Yep. And then it was this close to being Steve McQueen as the stunt son, but Steve McQueen dropped it because of disagreements with Newman, I think. And even Jack Lemmon was supposed to play the Sundance Kid at one point, but he dropped it because he thought he was
Man, I kind of wish it was Jack Lemmon.
We got Robert Redford because he was not a household name yet. Because Paul Newman's wife,
which is crazy.
No, Paul Newman's wife recommended him because he was mostly a theater actor on Broadway. Redford was finally attached to the picture, and they grew as close friends. The reason I put so much history into that is showing the trouble of making this. Sure, the background of it is this commentary on the Western, but I think the reason this movie works, the reason why people love it so much, is due to the chemistry that was developed of Robert Redford and Paul Newman on set as friends, that is reflected by the chemistry of these two characters in the film. And
right.
Can I bounce something off of that real quick? Being me, I need to reference the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
God
I
damn
think
it.
what you've just said has further nailed my point that I tried to make yesterday, that this is the Iron Man of Western movies.
Shut up.
It is.
Oh my God.
Okay. It is. All right. Robert Redford was not a well-known movie star. Okay. Now, yes, I know Robert Downey Jr. was a movie star prior, but they were
Wait,
both.
What?
All right, just keep going. I'm curious of where you're.
No, take us on this journey.
I'm taking you on the journey. Okay. So Western movies had always been something before, campy, or I'm not saying. Okay. Let me start this over. Comic book movies were campy, cheesy, all the above before, because that's the only way they knew how to adapt it from a comic book. Westerns were strictly tropes, plot devices, all this, because that's the only thing they thought a Western movie could be. This movie comes and it's like, hey, here's this way to do it. And none of the production companies wanted to do it because they thought that's too much of a risk. The pairing of Jon Favreau and Robert Downey Jr. is a classic Robert Redford, Paul Newman. Now, I know they're very different, but I'm just saying there are a lot of connections in this.
No, dude.
This paved the way for the modern Western movie. Iron Man paved the way for the modern superhero movie.
Okay, yeah. You heard it here first. Iron Man inspired Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
I promise you, if you went to Jon Favreau and said, so was your inspiration Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, he would look at you like, what the hell are you talking about?
Jon Favreau does look suspiciously a lot like Robert Redford.
Do you want to go around and do a quick point, where we just talk about the things we wrote down, our opinions about the movie, things like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
The blood was obviously red paint. Just gonna say that it was horrible looking. It looked so cheesy.
Come on, dude. It was 1969. It's not like.
I'm just
come on.
The fact that Sam has nothing to say about the script or the cinematography, but that blood, that red paint.
I'm talking about things that took me out of the movie experience, and it was the acapella singing and the paint blood. Okay, we just differ on these things. Okay,
Differ.
Whatever. Okay. Differ. My last thing.
Bird.
Yeah, no, tell us your third last thing, Sam.
Tell us your
please.
third defer.
No, that's my last thing.
All right, those are okay.
And it was a weird movie. That's all.
This will always be one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's incredible to take a concept like a Western and flip it on its head and do something completely different and amazing with it. I talked with you guys about this last night. I think it's kind of I wrote this down, the American Western film that goes against the American dream is that's brilliant.
Yeah.
In the sense of it doesn't work in America, so get the fuck out of America and go to a different country, But this movie makes me laugh. I think the energy between Redford and Newman is incredible. It's the birth of buddy comedies. It's one of the most unpredictable Western film plots that you will ever see. So yeah, I think it's super original with a really, it's a it's a genre that you can very easily get overdone and predictable, but they did something amazing and new, and still to this day, there has never been a Western like Butch Cassidy.
There's no hiding the fact that this is one of my favorite movies of all time. This is flawless filmmaking at a point. The ability to take a risk with a genre and with a story that many people in the wrong hands would turn into something very very commercial and very blockbuster-esque, a part of a system that Hollywood already created with the Westerns, which some people would argue, if you want to go back to Sam's damn Iron Man point, people argue today that the superhero film is the Western of our generation, the film that always comes out. And similarly with superhero films, once in a while you get a Logan or a Deadpool or something that comes out that takes a turn of the genre.
Thor Ragnarok.
I love that movie, but anyway, something that takes a turn on that genre and takes a liberty, a risk, and an artistic point with it. The script is an example of great structure in a story. The playing with tension, playing with anticipation. Let's talk about like the scene work in general of playing with tension. Later, there's a scene with a few Hispanic bandits that they have the choice of whether to let go or kill, and they don't speak English, so they don't know whether to fire their guns or not. And
I love that scene.
That's a great scene, because then once again you get a moment where you realize who Butch Cassidy is when he reveals that he has never killed anybody. Redford and Paul Newman are some of the greatest actors of the history of film. They're two of my favorites, and putting them together is something completely different. When they're on their own, we already get classics like Cool Hand Luke and 3 Days of the Condor and All the President's Men. Putting them together, though, that's why we chose these two films, and what makes them so special, and especially with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. We didn't even mention the cinematography, in which almost every shot in this film, I almost want to put like a con. I was writing pros and cons on this. One was that there was no score, but I started to warm up to that because I kind of liked the silence in it. And one was there's many just long shots of nothing but horse riding going on. And I realized it's because they're taking advantage. They're taking advantage of the beautiful on location sets that they were using. There's some stunts in here that I looked at and I go like, was that actually not the one with the horse? Because you could tell some of them are stunt doubles.
Right.
There was some that you could probably call out and say like that was definitely Redford and Newman.
No, it's incredible stunt work going on in the, like, man. And also, yeah, on your point before, the cinematography, like, it's, oh god, they found a way to work with the landscape so well. And like there was like the long open shots where they're riding the horses that they would keep it like a really wide shot, right? But then like when they're walking through the cavern or the canyons, you know, and the camera goes overhead and does this like twisting motion around it, like they used the camera to make you feel like you were in the actual landscape.
Yeah, they use so much visual storytelling, and for a film that has such, I'd say it's fairly scarce in terms of dialogue. I think it feels like it, because there's a lot of scenes where you just get like you're just looking at the mountains, but it feels like dialogue's going on because you're seeing and analyzing the screen so much. But I think it's so economic with its wording, which makes it so good script wise. Like you said, it was like a perfect script basically.
It's
like every single
one of the most perfect in my opinion.
Every single line is amazing.
Yeah,
and I think that's it's excellent screenwriting, because when they're speaking, it's important. When they're not speaking, it's sometimes even more important.
Every line in this either feeds to an important part of the story, an important part of the commentary, an important part of either of these two characters that we should care about, which makes us care about them even more, or it serves their relationship with each other, which we love. We love to see these two together, or it's just drop dead hilarious. This is a hilarious film.
Right.
And the dialogue in here, the banter, the witty banter, I'm a sucker for that in movies. Hence why I'm very complimentary of the movie next that we're going to talk about. But in this film, it's no different. In which the dialogue in this is so perfect. This I want to point out a specific scene.
Waterfall.
The waterfall. If you need a sort of if you just need to watch one scene to sort of get at the tone of what Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is, I'd say watch that scene.
I think you're very right. Like Sam hit it. I think you said it right that there is not a ton of dialogue in this movie, or at least there's like long periods of just montage, and there's these long sequences of no dialogue. But when you do have the dialogue, they don't waste a single word in there.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So why don't we switch on over to this thing?
Yeah.
You're moving on.
We'll come back to this right at the end.
Yeah. Cool.
So, anyways.
So let's move on. We're moving on 4 years later. Butch Cassidy and the this was really cool to read. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid came out in 1969. It won 4 Oscars. Was nominated for Best Picture. Lost to Midnight Cowboy.
Yeah.
Lost Best.
It lost to Midnight Cowboy.
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was a huge success. It was at its time, or at least by the time of the Sting, it was the 8th highest grossing film of all time.
Whew.
Robert Redford and Paul Newman would soon become the highest paid actors in Hollywood. It was a huge success. Everybody loved what they did. And we come to a return in 1973, the year after The Godfather, with The Sting.
Directed by George Roy Hill, written by David S. Ward, starring Paul Newman, Robert Redford, and Robert Shaw.
Robert Shaw. We can't forget Robert Shaw.
He's great in this movie. So I'm looking at the IMDb page for The Sting, and the summary is one sentence. Are you ready for this?
Yep.
2 grifters team up to pull off the ultimate con.
That's it? That's the whole description?
Well, you know what? I think it's right for them to do that. You can't really go into detail about this film without spoiling it, because the first thing I say is going into this film, I recommend to anybody who hasn't seen this, who hasn't seen The Sting.
It's the perfect heist movie.
Go into it not knowing a thing. It's a con artist film. It's about street con.
They're one and the same. Con artist film, heist film. It's tomato, you know.
The funny thing about the movie, it was not at all what I expected it to be. I still really enjoyed it and I loved it, but I feel like, so Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, like you could spend hours talking about the symbolism in it and the commentary it had on the 1960s, and just like there's so much depth in there. And you might hate me for saying this, but I feel like the Sting didn't have that depth to it. And but what was so enjoyable about it was that it's just like a feel good classic, like, you don't know where this is going, we have you on the edge of your seat, but it wasn't like anything deeper than just like a fun heist movie. And that's what was so amazing about it.
That's what I think is such a good contrast between these two movies, is that Butch Cassidy, I see it as kind of like, all right, the whole movie, it's success. You see how like these guys are always getting out of these situations. They're always pulling things off, even when things get bad. And at the end, they don't pull it off because things get
well, we don't know. We don't know.
He
said, what is it? He said, fuego, right? Fuego. Yeah. How many times?
I don't want to risk our censorship if this is going to YouTube here. But dude, they got fucked up.
so anyways, The Sting, I think, is the complete opposite with that, where it's, they have one success in the beginning, but it turns out that is not a success, and they just get put deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and you think that everything is turning out worse and worse and worse. And then at the end, you do get that success that feels so gratifying after like the struggle that Robert Redford, who is, I would say, the main character. This is less of a buddy film because he's more of the protagonist, I'd say. At least the perspective we have on it. Like, yes, plot wise they're working together and they're pretty equal on it. But I think Robert Redford's struggle through all this is the thing that we're rooting for.
And I think that's why people like it so much. Is back in the history that this ended up being the 4th highest grossing film of all time when it came out. Which is weird because the reason I think I really wanted to talk about this in tandem with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is that everybody talks about Butch Cassidy when they talk about classic films, particularly with Robert Redford and Paul Newman. But I don't think, if you go on YouTube, not many people have talked about The Sting that much. And I think that's a bit of a shame because sometimes you get style over substance, or substance and replacement of style. But I think these really work in tandem with each other for this. It's I think the script though kind of has a payoff that, if you want to call it realistic or not at the end, which because arguably there are holes in like this isn't a plot based in realism that Butch Cassidy sort of is. That's definitely fair, but I think it reflects perfectly off of the tone and the style that it commits to from the very opening title credit scene. You want to be Robert Redford and Paul Newman in this. You want to feel that smart. You want to feel that clever. You want to feel that smooth with this con that they're pulling on. And I think it's why this film appeals to whoever watches it.
I mentioned this yesterday again about this. You guys need to see the episode of Rick and Morty that I was talking about, because so the history of when this movie came out, it keeps it genuine, but like if something like this were to come out today, Knives Out, it would be completely different, I think.
Whoa, wait.
Hold on.
We all know that Sam's the biggest shit talker of Knives Out.
Yes. Great movie. I just don't like it, but we'll come to that a different day.
That's a super interesting sentence.
That is, if I know an oxymoron is like 2 words, but that is an oxymoronic statement, my dude.
Okay.
Great movie. Don't like it.
Okay, come on. So they have like a whole episode where they're talking about heists. I'm not going to spoil it, but they kind of ridicule the idea of double crosses and how, like, to what point can you double cross so much that it just becomes like, well, what's the point if like we're just going to treat the audience like they don't know what's up? Because I think like
hold on. What are you talking about here? Are you talking about Rick and Morty? Are you talking about Knives Out? Or are you talking about The Sting? You're talking about
all of them. I'm talking about like movies with double crosses in the end, where like the plot twists happen. And so like I think nowadays you have to go into movies not trusting any of the characters, because they all could have a double cross. If you know that it's going to be a heist movie or a con movie or any like a Mission Impossible, tons of the movies that have been coming out that have like these plot twists in them. And I think because of how often these kind of like, oh, we couldn't have trusted them from the beginning, or oh, they were in with us the whole time, like the FBI guys and Celino, is that the character?
Salinas,
the master assassin or whatever.
I think after Hooker.
Yeah, I think things like that, they just seem to Deus Ex Machina in the moment, and I think that might have been the wrong word to use, but I think these plot contrivances kind of desensitize the heist and con man genre in this day and age. Now recognizing that this came out before Ocean's everything came out, I think that this is a really genuine movie, and I really like the plot twists that happen. But that's just me commentating on plot twists.
Right. I think it's fun because it's one of the reasons I really loved this movie is it's like, I'm a big brain teaser guy, you know. I like stuff like this, and this is just like a movie version of a puzzle or a movie version of a brain teaser. So much so that like, man, it got me. It like the plot twist fooled me so bad. And like, I think what's amazing about that was I finished watching the movie and I was like, holy crap, I just watched a con movie and I got conned. Like they truly conned me in it with the whole like even in, oh my god, it's amazing. The conventional storytelling is you have this plan for something or something's going to happen, everything's going to go perfectly, and then boom, there's this big obstacle in the way. And for us it was, or for this movie it was the FBI, right? And then something happens and they either resolve it or they don't or whatever, but they usually resolve it, but there's this obstacle in the way. And then at the very end they revealed that there was no obstacle. Everything went according to plan. There was not a single obstacle in this, and like there was the assassin, but like she slept with him, so that really wasn't too much of an issue, was it?
You know, for people who like want to know about this and have not seen it, they're probably so confused of of like,
right.
So I'm just gonna explain real quick. So the Sting follows mostly, like Sam said, Robert Redford's character who plays Hooker. I'm trying to remember his name.
I'll pull up the names.
Is it Humphrey Hooker or something Hooker?
He is Johnny Hooker.
Yeah.
Johnny.
Say Jack Hooker.
Johnny Hooker. Johnny Hooker. He's a street hustler. He's a street con. After a tragedy, based on somebody that they pulled a con on, is forced to find Paul Newman, who is
an old friend, a friend of friends.
Who's an old friend of another friend of Robert Redford's. But he goes to Paul Newman, who is a very famous con man who used to run big cons, but is out of the game since he's been chased by the FBI. Who decide, as a form of revenge as well as just to get rich, pulled one of the biggest cons that they could on Robert Shaw's character, Mr. Lonigan, who is he works for a bank. That's all I pick up. He works for a bank. He's rich, and he's got a bit of a
godfather.
Pretty much, and he has a bit of a competitive complex, so they decide to run a hustle on him to get a lot of his money as a way of revenge for something that he did to them.
So I think they were talking about it during the movie, that it's not just about the money, it's about his reputation as this boss, and that if he can get ployed out of this much money, no one's going to trust him, and he won't be taken seriously at all. It's the whole like gangster movie stuff.
To quote Iron Man 2, made a god bleed. People
you got to do it like the Russian accent. Do it.
No, I'm not going to do that.
This movie is. This is going to be very dangerous to say this, but I'm going to say duller. Don't hate me for that. Yeah, and it's not even necessarily in the dialogue or anything, but I think it might even be the color palette and the set pieces, because a lot of the movie is taking place in really gray areas. Really, everyone's in gray suits and stuff. Of course, not Robert Redford. He's pulling the red pinstripe stuff. But I just, in Butch Cassidy, I found myself enjoying just looking at the screen and just seeing these beautiful like mountains and stuff, which I will say is attributed to the genres. That's what makes Westerns great, is how beautiful the surroundings are, and that this isn't about that, but that's what helped me enjoy the movie more, is how beautiful everything was surrounding these two characters, and how pleasant it was to watch. And this movie, I think you had to focus a little more to appreciate what was going on, because everything wasn't as pretty to watch.
I think that I actually felt the opposite of, like, I didn't have to focus as much with the Sting. Like the Butch Cassidy, I felt like I had to focus and really pick up on the cues that the director was laying down. Like I said, I think it's overall there's a moral to it, and there's a deeper meaning to everything. Whereas the Sting, yes, I had to pay attention to what was going on with the plot, because it's very easy to get confused with that plot line. But that's more of like a sit back and enjoy.
I think you're right in which you do. I think you're both right. Which with the Sting, I think you do have to pay more attention to get the value of it, because particularly with a plot, because just like a con, it's very convoluted and you have to pay attention to what's really going on. Even though it's trying to deceive you in a way. But I do also think it is a movie that you can just kick back and enjoy versus something like Butch Cassidy, even though I'm going to say comparing it, at the end. I really disagree with you though of the dullness of it. The Sting is about it. It's plain to say it's about the con, and it's about the time period, because I think it's actually an incredibly colorful film. I think the color palette is very almost, and this almost sounds like a criticism, but it's very cartoonish at some points. That this is like a cartoony reflection of the 30s and of cities during this time period. But I think it works with the tone that they're setting with these two characters in this plot. And that's even reflected in the score, that this is an animated version of a time period that we know very well. It's very colorful to me. And if not in colorful in like palette of their set pieces, it's colorful in tone. It's colorful with the humor that they're using, and the sort of pacing and energy that Robert Redford and Paul Newman once again do perfectly in this, doing justice to this film similarly to what they did in Butch Cassidy, but also incredibly different to what they did in Butch Cassidy.
You're totally right. They did what this film needed, or at least what the screenplay needed. But I do think that I agree with Sam in the sense of, I guess the way I would put it is that I think a lot of this movie was cheap thrills, which I enjoyed. And
it matches what it's about.
Right. And I had totally, yeah. And I had a great time watching it, and I really enjoyed it. And yeah, it totally duped me. But I think a lot of it was cheap thrills.
I've got a question. So which one of these movies, if you had to choose one, do you think you would prefer to show to your friends, who some of them may not be extreme filmaholics, whatever the word is, but if you had a bunch of friends over, they're like, oh, we should watch a movie, would you put on Butch Cassidy or The Sting?
I'd put on The Sting because I think it's easier to absorb. And that's also why I didn't. Yeah, and that's also why I didn't like it as much as Butch Cassidy, because I think it is. It has less to say, and it's more basic.
Because you.
Yes.
Because what?
Because you snooty.
I snooty.
It's an enjoyable movie though. But Butch Cassidy's funnier. At least to me. They're both funny, but I think I don't know, I think an audience would get a lot more of a kick out of the comedy in Butch Cassidy.
Well, probably just because it's written by a different guy. And I think William Goldman's better with dialogue than I do not recall his name. He also wrote Snapshot, who wrote The Sting.
David S. Ward.
Yeah, he was able to perfect story structure and the ability to play with expectation. Similar to Butch Cassidy does too, but this more so because it's a con movie.
That's a good point though, Sam, that I hadn't thought about that, of if I'm trying to show something that'll make people laugh, and Butch Cassidy I do think is a funnier film.
I bring that up because I was almost about to put on Butch Cassidy for my family this morning. I was like, hey, do you guys want to watch it? But I was like, or should we watch The Sting? It's such a hard question to answer, because I think it's just a matter of how much you believe in the intellectualness of the people you're watching it with, which is terrible to say.
I'm trying to piss so many people off by saying that.
I know.
God, you're making us sound like assholes.
I know, yeah.
No, I think the other thing with it is that when you're thinking about showing a movie to a group of people, one thing you have to take into consideration too is that Butch Cassidy doesn't have the production quality or just in film quality, camera quality.
Whoa.
No, check me. Butch Cassidy doesn't have no, in terms of no, come on. In terms of actual how many pixels. I'm just saying in terms of actual camera quality.
I don't know.
No.
The Sting is better cameras. It's made 4 years later. They have better cameras. I'm saying that is totally something that when I've shown people Yeah, but totally. But when I've shown people movies, I mean, you look at like Butch Cassidy is a little more blurry than The Sting is. And this is something that like you watch them because that's what it is.
I wrote in my notes that Butch Cassidy's film quality was incredible. I said it during the movie. I was like, this looks like a modern movie.
I agree. I actually do think, even with the point that you're saying of like use, like of not of just cinematography, but quality of picture, I think Butch Cassidy does it better than The Sting.
I wouldn't say better. I'd say they're on equal grounds. Just
Equal
because
I'm talking in terms of equipment they use. The cameras are better in The
sure
Sting.
they are, but I don't think you can notice that.
But that is something that, like, nowadays when we're watching movies, we're so used to the movies coming out being these like incredibly beautiful, like amazing. I mean, that like a lot of movies these days are really trying to please visually more than they're trying to please emotionally or with depth, you know? So that's something that like the modern film watcher is so used to visuals. And I think that Sting does a better job of, not better job. I guess I don't know what I'm ranting on here, but I've definitely had that complaint before when I've shown people movies from the past and they go, yeah, it's a good movie, but man, I hate old movies because I hate the film quality. So I think let's go around and say our reviews of our ratings of each movie. So let's start with Butch Cassidy. If you want to say one sentence about it as well to justify your rating, you can. I'll start because it's one of my favorite movies of all time. I rate Butch Cassidy a 9.4 out of 10. I think it's a really great twist on Westerns and funny and good energy. That's my sentence.
Good answer.
All right, Jack.
Okay. Once again, not these two films are some of my favorites in film history, as well as just personal favorites because I love to watch both countlessly. Butch Cassidy has a incredible script that I think should be studied for the future of filmmaking. It's shot gorgeously. It's well structured. You love these two characters, even though technically they aren't even like good people. If you want to take it there.
Well, save that for another time. We'll save that discussion for another time.
Paul Newman and Robert Redford continue to prove that they are some of the greatest actors of our generation. And I'm probably just going to repeat some of this with The Sting. As well as films like this. Let me just say, like, films like this, like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, inspire people like the three of us to make films, to write, and to act, to make art and products like this. So I'm probably going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. Yeah.
I think great point. I think that's a great point.
Acapella was weird to me. 9 out of 10. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the final comment I'll say about Butch Cassidy is it is Iron Man. Like, I think that's the
So
I'll give it 9.4, the Iron Man of Western films.
Yeah.
The Sting. I think the Sting is a lot easier to digest. It's fun. It has incredible plot twists to it. I think it's just a fun watch with your friends type of movie, lay back, chill sort of thing, which I really enjoyed. I didn't have to think too hard about it. The energy, once again, with Redford and Newman was off the charts. I think another thing that's really great about watching that movie nowadays is that there's about 10 different times in the movie where, as I was watching it, I was like, oh shit, this inspired Oceans. Oh shit, this inspired Now You See Me, even, you know? Like, there's all these, like, it's one of those great movies that as you watch it, you just get hit with, oh, it influenced this and this and this and this. So I give it a 9 out of 10.
Well said.
like I said, I might be just repeating things of Butch Cassidy with the Sting. Once again, Robert Redford and Paul Newman take advantage of a very, very smart script, and I'm always a stickler. If we do future videos and podcasts of these, I'm probably going to take a lot of time to talk about the script, because I always think that a film, maybe not always, of course there are exceptions, always starts with a great script, and I think this is no different. I think it's a little sad, and the only gripe is that this was the last true Robert Redford Paul Newman film that we got, and I'm a little sad that we didn't get more after this. But I think there's a little bit of a treasureness to that. It's a great film. I agree that it's probably easier to digest and show friends and family. But the last thing I want to touch on before I give my rating, because we didn't talk about it, and it's something that I think plays a lot to why I love this film. It's one of my favorite scores of all time. The ability to take Scott Joplin's entertainer and build it. It'll be stuck in your head for the rest of the day. It plays into it, it plays to the tone of it, and I think it's such a clever score to play into, such a clever script for such a clever movie. I'd probably also give it 9 out of 10.
All right, 2 quick things. The Sting 2 is a movie.
It is a movie.
Not starring Robert Redford and Paul Newman.
Oh
Robert
God,
Shaw.
we're gonna have to roast that movie.
This is the last thing I'm gonna say. I didn't bring this up. Snyder, meh.
Oh right, you did not like
Right.
8
Yeah.
out of 10.
8 out of 10.
Yeah, as far as villains go, he was pretty weak.
He's not the main villain. We didn't even talk about Robert Shaw.
Well, it's too
God
late.
damn it, we did not give ourselves enough time to discuss these movies.
For Robert Shaw, my first time.
You get one thing to say.
Well, like Robert Shaw, at first I was a little worried that he was going to be a bit cartoony, but I think it works for this.
He was.
He was cartoony. I mean, let's get this straight. He was cartoony. But like I said, these are things that work for this screenplay.
That poker scene is fantastic.
Oh, I'll talk about the poker scene all day, but we don't have that much time to do that.
I did just for the poker scene.
All right, so Sam, your review of it is, your rating?
8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. All right.
I had fun. I think we talked about intellectual enough things, because we got our sticks up our butt or whatever.
We definitely sound very pretentious after.
Yeah.
One of our points that we made was that we would show people the other movie because they're too dumb to understand the other movie.
That's true.
We really sound like asses.
So on that note of how pretentious we are, do you think this is a good place to stop?
Yeah.
Say sayonara?
Yeah.
So,
Now that people definitely don't ever want to listen to us talking again, I think this is a great place to stop.
well, if you are to watch this on SoundCloud or on...
Can't watch it on SoundCloud.
Fuck.
Yeah, dummy.
If you were to listen to this on SoundCloud or watch this on YouTube, please subscribe if you would like to, or listen. Just we gotta throw that in there.
I hate that.
Let me restate that. We don't need subscribers. It won't help us put out other videos or not. We're gonna make more videos regardless. This is not about you guys. I'm sorry.
If anything, report us. That's what we want. Report us.
Report us on narcissism.
This has been fun. Thank you for tuning in.
Somebody tell us
to
when
no
to
one.
stop.
Yeah, this was the first installment of Tell me when to stop.
Yes.
This is the first installment of Tell me when to stop.